You want to know the truth about Wren Calloway? Fine, I'll tell you, but you have to understand something first. Everything you've read about her is wrong. Not all of it. But the parts that matter, the parts where they make her sound like some kind of weapon born for killing, those are wrong. I knew her before any of that, before the medals, before the name they whisper now in the war colleges of 9 systems. I sat 3 seats behind her in a classroom for 2 years. And I'm not even human. My name doesn't translate well into your mouths, so the humans at the academy called me Sable, because of the color of my hide, I think, or maybe because it was easy to say. I never minded. I'm Thrivani. We come from a cold world with 2 small suns and a lot of stone. We're tall, we're patient, and we don't talk much unless something needs saying. That's probably why I noticed her at all. Because she didn't talk much either. Let me set this properly for you. Take a breath. I'm going to take you back. The Concordat Joint Officer Academy sits in orbit around a dead moon called HFY. It's a station, but the word station makes it sound small. It isn't. It's the size of a city, all curved corridors and gravity rings and observation decks where you can watch the stars wheel by so slow it feels like the whole universe is holding still just for you. 26 species sent cadets there back then. The Concordat was younger than people remember. It still felt like a thing that might fall apart. Humanity had only joined 11 standard years before. They were the new ones, the fragile ones. You have to understand how the rest of us saw humans in those days. Soft, that was the word. Not cruel, just true as far as we knew. They lived short lives. They broke easily. A Thrivani can take a fall that would shatter a human spine and just stand back up. The Khoran, who breathe through their skin, can hold themselves underwater for half a day. The veil can see in spectrums humans can't even dream about. And humans had soft bodies and softer hearts. They cried. They laughed too loud. They got attached to things, to people, to objects, to ideas, in a way the rest of us found almost embarrassing. We didn't think they belonged in a war academy. We were polite about it mostly, but we thought it. I thought it too. I'm not proud of that. The first day I saw Wren Calloway, she was lost. Not dramatically, just standing at the wrong junction of the recruit deck, holding a transfer slip, turning it over in her hands like the answer might be printed on the back. Small girl. Brown hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She had this way of standing very still, like she was trying to take up as little room in the world as she could manage. I was passing by. I almost kept walking. But she looked up, and she had these gray eyes, not cold, just very steady, and she said, "Sorry. Do you know where Block 7 is?" Quiet voice, almost a whisper, the kind of voice you have to lean in to catch. I told her. I pointed. She thanked me twice, which I'd later learn was a human thing. They thank you for everything, sometimes for things you haven't done yet. Then she walked off, and I forgot about her. That's the part that gets me looking back. I forgot about her. The most dangerous person I would ever meet in my long life, and I forgot her inside of a minute. You learn fast at the academy who the loud ones are. There was a Khoran named Dask who could argue any instructor into the ground. There was a human boy, Mateo, who laughed like a collapsing building and had a different opinion about everything. There were the Veil twins, who finished each other's sentences and were so good at simulations that the instructors started giving them harder ones just to watch them sweat. And then there was Wren. Wren didn't argue. Wren didn't laugh loud. In 2 years, I think I heard her speak in class maybe a dozen times, and only ever when she was asked directly. She'd answer in that whisper, give exactly the information needed, and then go quiet again. The instructors called on her less and less. Why bother? She wasn't going to perform. She wasn't going to push back. She was just there. There's a thing that happens to quiet people in a crowd. They become furniture. They become part of the room. You stop registering them as a person and start treating them as scenery. That's what happened to Wren. And I'll tell you the strangest part. I don't think she minded. I think, and I only understood this much later, I think she wanted it that way. I think being scenery was the safest she ever felt. There was one class where she wasn't furniture. Tactical theory, taught by an old Thrivani named Instructor Vol, who had fought in 3 real wars and walked with a limp he refused to fix because he said the pain kept him honest. Vol didn't care about your species or your size or how loud you talked. He cared about one thing: could you think when everything was falling apart? Most cadets couldn't. Not really. We could recite doctrine. We could run the standard formations. But the moment Vol threw something unexpected at a simulation, a betrayal, a sudden loss of comms, a civilian in the line of fire, most of us froze. Wren never froze. I remember the first time I noticed it. Vol had set up a scenario, a defensive line, a town behind it, an enemy advance. Textbook. Half the class set up textbook defenses. Then Vol changed it. He had the enemy ignore the line entirely and swing wide toward the town's water supply. The class scrambled. People started shouting orders over each other. Dosk wanted to split forces. The Vale twins wanted to fall back and regroup. Everyone had an answer, and all the answers were loud, and none of them were good. Then Vol said, "Calloway, you've been quiet." And Wren said soft, almost like she was apologizing, "They don't want the town. They want us to chase them away from the line. The water's the bait. If we move, they hit the line where it's thin." A pause. "I'd let them have the water. You can ration water. You can't unloose a defensive position." The room went quiet. Vol ran her version. The enemy hit the thin line, exactly like she said. The cadets who chased the water lost the whole engagement. Vol didn't praise her. He just looked at her for a long moment with those deep-set Thrivani eyes, and he nodded once, slow. "Yes," he said, "most of you would have died saving the water. Calloway would have let you stay thirsty and alive." A few cadets laughed, uncomfortable. Wren had already gone back to looking at the table. I started watching her after that. Not in a strange way, just I got curious. We Thrivani are patient, and patience is mostly just curiosity that's learned to wait. Here's what I noticed. She ate alone, but not unhappily. She'd find a corner of the mess hall and she'd sit with her back to the wall, always to the wall. I never once saw her sit with her back to a room, and she'd eat slow and watch everything. Not nervous, just aware. Like she was reading the room the way the rest of us read a textbook. She was kind in small ways. When a first-year Corin spilled a tray and the whole hall went quiet to watch, Wren was the one who got up and helped him clean it. No fuss. Just down on her knees, picking up the mess, saying something soft that made the kid stop looking like he wanted to die. She didn't drink at the gatherings the cadets had on rest cycles. She'd come, sometimes, stand at the edge for an hour, then slip out so quietly you wouldn't notice she was gone until later. And once, this is the one that stayed with me, once I saw her in the training hall at the 3rd hour of the sleep cycle, when she thought no one was around. She wasn't training exactly. There was no instructor, no program running. She was just moving. Slow, deliberate, through some sequence of motions I didn't recognize. Not Concordat combat doctrine. Not any school I knew. Her own thing. Her eyes were half closed and her breathing was so even it was like watching water. She moved like she'd been doing it her whole life. Like it was older than she was. I stood in the doorway and watched for maybe a minute. Then she stopped, mid-motion, and without turning around she said, "Quiet. You can come in, Sable. I don't mind." I hadn't made a sound. I'm sure of it. Thrivani are heavy, but we move quiet when we want to. She'd known I was there the whole time. I made some excuse and left. My hearts were beating strange. I told myself it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. The thing about war is that it never announces itself the way the stories say it will. There was no dramatic alarm, no instructor bursting into the lecture hall. The Concordat had been at peace, more or less, for as long as any of us cadets had been alive. We thought of war the way you think of weather on a planet you'll never visit. A thing that happened, theoretically, somewhere far away to other people. The Khoradi changed that. I'll tell you what I knew then, which wasn't much, and what I learned later, which was more. The Khoradi weren't from inside the Concordat. They came from the dark between the arms of the galaxy, a place we didn't have good maps for. We'd had contact with them, a few trade envoys, some cautious diplomacy. They were big, bigger than Threvani even. Armored naturally, with a kind of plated hide that shrugged off small arms fire. They had a culture built entirely around conquest, and a long memory, and a deep and patient contempt for anything weaker than themselves. And they had decided that the Concordat's outer worlds were weak. They weren't entirely wrong. The first world fell in 2 days, a mining colony called Tessely Reach. We heard about it the way you hear about a death in a family far away, second-hand, delayed, unreal. The Concordat command sent a fleet. The fleet didn't come back in any shape worth mentioning. The academy changed overnight. Graduation timelines collapsed. The instructors stopped teaching theory and started teaching the things you only teach people you expect to die soon: field medicine, last stand tactics, how to make a weapon out of whatever's in your hands. The simulations got darker. The corridors got quieter. The loud cadets got quieter too. And Wren Calloway got even more still, if that was possible. But it was a different kind of still now. Before, she'd been hiding. Now she was waiting. I didn't know the difference yet. I learned it. They activated us early. The whole senior class. Pinned provisional officer ranks on us and shipped us out to a staging world called Coriol, which I'd never heard of and which I will never, as long as I live, forget. Coriol was a border world, agricultural mostly, wide gold plains and a thin sky and a single major city built around a river. The kind of place that had no business being anywhere near a war. There were families there, children, old folk who'd lived their whole lives without seeing a weapon fired in anger. The Concordat decided to make a stand at Coriol because the math said they had to. If Coriol fell, the Khoradi had a clear path to 3 core systems. So they shipped in everything they could: regular troops, what was left of the fleet, and a whole crop of half-trained cadets like us, because there was no one else. I remember stepping off the transport onto Coriol soil. Real wind. It smelled like the grain that grew there, sweet and dusty. The sky was that pale gold of a setting sun. And I remember Wren standing beside me, looking out at the plains, very quiet, with an expression on her face I couldn't read. "It's beautiful," I said. "I don't know why. To fill the silence, maybe." "Yeah," she said, soft as ever. "Then, they always are, the ones you have to hold." I didn't ask what she meant by always. I should have. There was a whole history in that word, and I walked right past it. Here is where I have to tell you about the Vorn-class soldiers. The Khoradi didn't just send infantry. They sent the Vorn. Their elite. Their best. Picture this. A creature already bigger than a Threvani, already armored by nature, and then build a war machine around it. Powered exaframe. Layered plating. A repeating cannon mounted to one arm that could cut a Concordat soldier in half through cover. They moved in squads of 6, and a single squad could take a fortified position that should have held against 100 regular troops. We'd studied them in the briefings. There were images, combat footage from Tessely Reach, from the worlds that fell before. I watched some of the cadets go pale, watching that footage. I watched the loud ones go quiet. I watched Wren watch it with that same steady, half-lidded calm, the way you'd watch a storm you'd seen before and survived. After the briefing, one of the human cadets, Mateo, the loud one, laughed his collapsing building laugh, but it came out wrong, thin and scared. "We can't fight that," he said. "Look at it, we can't fight that." And Wren, who almost never spoke unless asked, said quietly, "Yes, we can." Everyone looked at her. "You can't outmuscle it," she said. "So you don't try. Everything has a hinge, a joint, a seam in the plate, a blind spot where the frame meets the body. You get small, you get close, and you put everything you have into the one place it isn't looking. A pause. Big things are slow to change their mind. That's the whole secret. That's all of it. Mateo stared at her. How do you know that? Wren looked at the floor. I read a lot, she said. She was lying. I knew it then, the way you know a thing in your bones before your brain catches up. She wasn't reading any of this off a page. She'd done it before. The attack came at dawn on the 4th day. I won't pretend I remember it in order. War doesn't happen in order. It happens all at once and then in pieces, and you spend the rest of your life trying to sort the pieces into something that makes sense. What I remember is the sound first. A low, building hum from the sky, and then the sky lighting up not like a sunrise, like a wound opening. The Khoradi dropships came down through the clouds in lines, dozens of them, and where they landed the gold plains turned black. I remember the city's alarms. I remember the regular troops moving to the forward line, and us, the cadets, getting shoved into a secondary defensive position around the eastern districts, where the civilians hadn't finished evacuating. That's the detail that mattered. The civilians hadn't finished evacuating. There were still people in the eastern districts, families, the old, the slow, the ones who couldn't run. I remember Instructor Vole he'd shipped out with us. He wouldn't have done otherwise, limping along our line, calm as stone, saying the same thing to each of us. You hold. You don't chase glory. You don't chase the water. You hold your piece of ground and you keep these people alive. That is the whole job. Hold. And I remember Wren. She'd been assigned to my section. Maybe 20 cadets, dug into a half-ring of buildings and rubble at the edge of a residential block. She moved up and down the line before the fighting started, and she didn't say much, but what she said was always exactly right. To the cadet shaking too hard to load his weapon, she put a hand on his shoulder and said something I didn't catch, and his hands went still. To the two who'd set up their firing position wrong, she fixed it without making them feel stupid. To Mateo, who was trying to laugh and failing, she said, "Stay next to me. We'll be all right." She didn't outrank any of us. We were all the same provisional grade. But somewhere in those minutes before the storm hit, without a single order being given, the whole section started looking to her. I looked to her too. The tall, patient Thrivani, 3 years older than this small, soft-spoken human, and I found myself watching her for the signal to move, to fire, to breathe. I think she knew it was going to happen. I think she'd seen it happen to herself before. The first wave was regular Khoradi infantry. Big, armored, frightening, but slow and not as coordinated as the briefings had warned. Our line held. The cadets did better than anyone had a right to expect. There's something about defending people behind you, real people, that does things to a creature's courage. Even ours. Even the soft humans. We held the first wave. We held the second. I started to think, God's help me, I actually started to think that we might do this. That the math was wrong. That a line of half-trained cadets might hold the eastern districts after all. Then the Vorn came. You don't hear the Vorn at first. That's the awful thing. The regular infantry are loud, they roar, they fire wild, they want you to be afraid. The Vorn don't bother. They don't need you afraid. They move with this terrible economy, this patience, picking their way through the rubble toward the seams in your line, and you don't notice them until the cadet beside you is simply gone, cut down through 2 walls by a cannon you never saw fire. That's how it started. Cadets dying without a sound, without a chance, the line buckling not from fear but from the simple physics of it. You cannot stop a thing that kills you through the wall you're hiding behind. The line broke on the left. I saw it go. I saw 3 cadets break and run, and I couldn't even blame them because what they were running from wasn't a fight, it was an execution. And behind us, behind the broken left flank, was a transport shelter, full of civilians, the slow ones, the ones who hadn't finished evacuating. A Khoradi Vorn squad was about to walk straight through the gap and into that shelter, and there was nothing standing in the way. Except Wren was already moving. I didn't see her decide. There was no moment of decision. One instant she was beside me in the line, and the next she was gone, low and fast across the open ground toward the gap, toward the shelter, toward 6 Vorn-class soldiers alone. I shouted her name. I'm sure I did. I don't remember the sound of it. Matteo started after her and Vol grabbed him by the collar and held him. And I heard the old Thrivani say, in a voice I'd never heard from him, low and almost reverent, watch her and remember it. I'll tell you what I saw. I'll tell you exactly, because I've gone over it 10,000 times and I still don't fully believe it, and I was there. The first Vorn never saw her. She came in low from its blind side, the seam where the frame met the body, just like she'd said in the briefing room, the place it wasn't looking, and she went up and in with something in her hand, a breaching charge, and she put it where the plates didn't cover and rolled away before it blew. The Vorn went down, a thing the size of a building down in the space of 2 breaths. The second one turned toward the sound, slow. Big things are slow to change their mind. That's the whole secret, that's all of it. And by the time it had turned, she was already inside its reach, too close for the cannon, moving through that same strange water-smooth sequence I'd watched her practice alone at the 3rd hour of the sleep cycle. Up the frame, into the seam, down it went. The third one fired and missed, because she wasn't where it expected. She was never where they expected. She was a small, soft-spoken thing in a war built for giants, and she had turned her own smallness into the deadliest weapon on that field. She moved like she wasn't afraid. That's what undid me. She moved like fear was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. The cadets stopped running. I want you to understand that because it matters more than the killing. The cadets who'd broken and fled, they stopped. They turned around. Because the thing they'd been running from, the unstoppable thing, the execution thing, a single quiet girl was taking it apart in front of them, and that did something to the field that no order ever could. They came back. They reformed the line. They poured fire into the gap to keep the regular infantry off her back while she worked, and I was firing too. All of us were, and over the noise I could hear Vol, the old soldier who'd seen 3 wars, saying it again and again under his breath like a prayer in the old Thrivani tongue. There she is. There's the human they kept hidden. And I didn't understand what he meant. But I was about to. Because the 4th Vorn, the 4th one, had learned. It had watched the first 3 die, and it had done the thing the others couldn't. It had changed its mind in time. And it caught her. I'll stop there. Not for drama. Because the next part is the part everyone gets wrong, and I need you to hear it right, and to hear it right you need a breath. You think you know how this goes. You think the quiet girl is some kind of natural-born warrior, a freak of talent, a mystery the universe coughed up. That's the story they tell now. The legend, soft-spoken in class, battle-hardened in war, like it just happened to her, like it was magic. It wasn't magic. There was a reason she sat with her back to the wall. There was a reason she knew I was in the doorway. There was a reason a girl that young moved like a thing older than she was, and lied about reading it in a book, and let herself become furniture in a room full of louder people. Wren Calloway had a secret, and in the moment that 4th Vorn caught her, in the moment I was sure I was about to watch her die in the gold dust of a world that wasn't hers, that secret was the only thing in 9 systems that could have saved her. I'll tell you what it was, but you'll have to come back for the second half to hear it. I left you in the gap. 4th Vorn, it had learned. It had watched 3 of its squad die, and it had done the thing none of them managed in time. It had changed its mind fast enough to catch her. So let me back up, just a little, because before I tell you what happened in that gap, I have to tell you the secret. The thing that explains all of it. The thing I didn't know while it was happening and only pieced together after, from records I wasn't supposed to see, and a story Vol told me one night when he was old and dying and finally ready to say it out loud. Wren Calloway, was 19 years old at the academy. That's what her file said. That's what she told everyone, 19. She'd been fighting wars since she was 11. Here's what I learned. There's a corner of human space, anyway, by the time I learned all this it had a different name, called the Drennen Belt. A cluster of mining worlds and habitats out past the edge of anywhere the Concordat cared about. Poor. Forgotten. The kind of place a young government leaves to fend for itself while it's busy looking impressive to the rest of the galaxy. The Drennen Belt fended for itself by getting eaten. Not by the Khoradi. This was years before the Khoradi. It was eaten by its own pirate clans, then warlords, then something worse than warlords, a thing the Drennen survivors only ever called the Cull. I never got a clean account of what the Cull was. Slavers, partly. Something organized and patient and very good at making whole colonies disappear. Wren was born on a Drennen habitat called Ceph. She was 8 when the Cull came for it. She was 11 the first time she killed someone who was trying to kill her. By the time the Concordat finally noticed the Drennen Belt existed and sent a relief flotilla, there were almost no adults left in the resistance. The fighting had ground them down to children, kids who'd grown up with a rifle longer than their own arm, who'd learned tactics not from a classroom, but from the simple fact that the slow ones died and the clever ones lived. There was a whole generation out there that had never known a single day of peace. The Concordat relief crews called them in their reports the Belt Orphans. Wren was one of them, one of the last cells. When the flotilla found her, she was 15, and she'd been the field commander of a unit of 40 for 2 years, and almost all of those 40 were younger than she was. The Concordat did the merciful thing by their lights. They took the Belt Orphans in. They gave them homes, counselors, new names where the old ones were too painful. They tried to give them childhoods, 8 years too late. And a few of the orphans, the ones who couldn't put it down, the ones for whom the war was the only language they had left, a few of them went into the academies, quietly, with their files cleaned up, with their ages rounded off and their histories sealed because the Concordat was embarrassed, because we ignored a human sector until its children had to raise themselves on slaughter, is not a thing a young proud government wants in its public record. So they hid them. They scrubbed the files and folded the Belt Orphans into the cadet population and hoped no one would look too closely. That's the secret. That's the whole mystery pulled inside out. Wren Calloway wasn't a soft-spoken girl who turned out to be a natural-born warrior. She was a warrior who'd spent 4 years trying, with everything she had, to learn how to be a girl. The quiet wasn't shyness. It was discipline, the discipline of someone who'd learned that the ones who shout draw fire. The back to the wall was instinct burned and too deep to remove. The knowing where everyone is, the reading of the room, the way she could feel me in a doorway without turning around, that wasn't a gift. It was a scar. It was 8 years of staying alive by never, ever stopping the count of where the threats were. She let herself become furniture in that classroom because being furniture was the only piece she'd ever been allowed to taste. The whisper, the stillness, the small kindnesses to younger cadets, that was her reaching for the childhood the war had eaten. That was the bravest thing she did, braver than the Gap. She was trying so hard to be ordinary. And then the Khoradi came and Coriol burned, and there were slow people behind her who couldn't run, and something in her that she'd spent 4 years carefully, gently putting to sleep, woke up. Now the Gap. The 4th Vorn caught her. Its cannon arm came around faster than the others had managed, and it didn't fire, it swung, a backhand blow with a limb the size of a falling tree. And it caught her across the body and threw her into the side of a building hard enough that I felt the impact through my own feet from 40 meters away. The line went silent. Even the gunfire seemed to pause. I think every cadet on that field stopped breathing at once. She lay in the rubble and didn't move. And the Vorn, slow, certain, patient, began to walk toward her to finish it. Mateo screamed something. Vol held the line, would not let anyone break to her, because Vol understood something the rest of us didn't. Vol had been watching her the whole time, and Vol knew what I would only learn years later. He knew she wasn't done. Because Wren Calloway had been hit harder than that, by worse than that, when she was 11 years old. And she had learned a lesson on the Drennan belt that no academy teaches and no soft-lived creature ever has to learn. You can be afraid later, you can hurt later, you can fall apart later when the slow ones behind you are safe, but not now. Now you get up. She got up. I have seen a lot of things in my long life. I am old now even by Thrivani reckoning, and I have stood on the decks of dying ships and walked the ash of worlds. I have never seen anything like the sight of that small broken girl pushing herself up out of the rubble of a building on a world that wasn't hers, blood on her face, one arm hanging wrong, to put herself back between a war machine and a shelter full of strangers. She didn't even look angry, that's what I remember. There was no rage in her. Rage is loud, and she had spent her whole life learning that loud gets you killed. She just looked tired and certain. The way you look at a chore you've done 1,000 times and will do 1,000 more because no one else is going to do it. The Vorn reached her, and she did the last thing it expected. She didn't dodge. She didn't run. She went toward it, right under the descending arm, inside its reach, into the one place that much mass and that much armor could never bring its weapons to bear, pressed up against the body of the thing itself, in the blind seam, where she'd been telling us all along the giant wasn't looking. She had one charge left. I learned that later too. One. She put it in the seam. And then, and this is the part the legends leave out, the part that makes me have to stop and gather myself even now, she didn't roll away. She couldn't, the arm hung wrong. The body wouldn't move fast enough, she knew it. She had to have known it. She'd done the math the way she always did the math, the way she'd done it in Vol's classroom. You can't unloose a defensive position. You can ration water, but you can't unloose the line. And the math said that if she let go to save herself, the charge might not seat, the Vorn might survive, the gap might hold open long enough for the shelter to fall. So she held the charge in place with her one good hand, and she held the Vorn's blind seam against her own body, and she did not let go. I started running. I broke the line. Vol let me this time. Maybe he was running too. I don't remember. I remember the open ground and the gold dust and the impossible distance between me and her. I remember it was her, that soft voice somehow carrying across all that noise, saying something. Not a war cry, not a scream. She said, "Get behind the wall." To me, to Mateo, to all of us pounding across the open ground toward her. Get behind the wall. Still giving the order that kept the slow ones alive, even then, even at the very end of it. The charge went off. She lived. I have to tell you that part right away, because I've made you wait long enough and I'm not cruel. She lived. The Vorn's own body shielded her from the worst of the blast. She'd known it would. She'd done the math on that too. The giant's armor became her armor in the half-second the charge took to do its work. The thing came apart and came down, and it came down on top of her, and we dug her out of the wreck of the monster that had nearly killed her, and she was alive. Barely. The kind of barely that medical bays are built for, broken in more places than I want to list. She didn't wake up for 9 days. But she lived, and the shelter held. Every slow one, every old one, every child who couldn't run, every single one of them walked off Coriol when the relief came, because a quiet girl decided not to let go of a charge in a blind seam. The line held too. I'd like to say it was strategy that held it, but it wasn't. It was her. The whole eastern flank held because a thing that should have been impossible happened in front of them, and you cannot run from a fight when someone has shown you in their own body that the unbeatable thing can be beaten. We held Coriol. The Concordat held the line at Coriol, and the 3 core systems behind it never fell, and the war turned there, on that gold plain on that 4th day. The histories give the credit to the fleet and the commanders and the broad sweep of strategy. Fine, let them. I know where it turned. I was there. It turned in a gap in the line on the eastern flank, in the space of about 90 seconds, around a girl who weighed less than my arm. She woke up on the 9th day. I was there. I'd more or less refused to leave, and Threvani are large and stubborn, and the medical staff eventually decided it was easier to let me stay than to move me. Her eyes opened, gray, steady even then. She looked at the ceiling for a while, then she looked at me. And do you know what she said? The hero of Coriol, the girl whose name they now teach in 9 systems, the one who took apart a Vorn squad with her hands and a fistful of charges. She said very quietly, almost embarrassed, "Did everyone get behind the wall?" That was the first thing. Before her own name, before asking what happened, before anything. Did everyone get behind the wall? I told her yes, everyone. The shelter, the line, the slow ones, all of them. I told her she'd held it. She closed her eyes. And this small thing happened, this thing I'll carry until I die. A tear ran down the side of her face into her hair, just one, and her mouth moved, and she said, so soft I had to lean in the way I had the very first time she ever spoke to me in that corridor. Good, then I can rest now. And she slept again. Not the unconscious sleep of the wounded, real sleep, easy sleep. The first easy sleep, I think, of her whole life, because for the first time since she was 8 years old on a habitat called Ceph, the slow ones were safe, and the line was held, and there was nothing left she had to stay awake to count. I sat with her while she slept, the tall, patient Threvani who'd forgotten her inside of a minute on the first day. I sat there and I understood finally all of it. The back to the wall, the whisper, the corner of the mess hall, the water-smooth sequence at the 3rd hour of the night. She had never been a mystery. We just never bothered to ask the right question. We kept asking, how is the quiet girl so good at war? We should have asked, what did the war have to do to a child to make her this quiet? She made full officer, of course. They tried to give her a parade. She refused it. They tried to put her face on recruitment material. She refused that too, and the one time I saw her actually angry, actually loud, the only time in all the years I knew her was when a journalist called her a natural-born soldier. There's no such thing, she said, not loud exactly, but hard as I ever heard her. Nobody's born this. Somebody makes you this. And then everybody wants to act like it grew on you natural because that's easier than admitting what got done. The journalist didn't print that part. She spent the rest of her career, the whole long rest of it, doing 2 things. She fought the Khoradi, and she was very, very good at it, and the war was shorter than it should have been because of her. And whenever she could, in between, she went looking for the other belt orphans, the hidden ones, the scrubbed files, the children the Concordat had folded quietly into its academies and hoped to forget. She found them, one by one, and she didn't try to fix them, because she knew you can't fix it. The war doesn't come back out of you once it's gone in. She just sat with them. Back to the wall, both of them, 2 people who could feel each other in a doorway without turning around. And she told them the thing nobody had told her. It wasn't your fault. You were a child. You did what kept the slow ones alive, and you're allowed to rest now. She gave them the sentence she'd given herself on the 9th day, over and over, to every one of them she could find. That was her real war, not Coriol, the other one, the quiet one, the one she fought for the rest of her life, soft-spoken, in classrooms and medical bays and the corners of mess halls across 9 systems. I'm old now. Wren is gone, not in the war. In the end she died the way she'd fought so hard to earn the right to, old and quiet in her sleep, with the slow ones long since safe. I was there for that too. I made sure of it. The least a friend can do is be in the doorway where she can feel you at the end. People still ask me about her. The students at the war colleges mostly. They've read the legend. Soft-spoken in class, battle-hardened in war. The mystery girl. The natural. They want me to tell them the secret of how she was so deadly so they can be deadly too. I always disappoint them. I tell them what I've told you. She wasn't deadly because she was gifted. She was deadly because she was made by a thing so cruel I won't describe it to children. And the only mercy in any of it was that she took what was done to her and spent it protecting the kind of people it was done to. And then when the question's done and the legend's punctured and the students are looking at me a little stunned, I tell them the last thing. The thing I think she'd actually want remembered. Not the gap, not the Vorn, not the count of the kills or the turning of the war. I tell them the line she said when she opened her eyes on the 9th day, before she asked her own name, before anything. Did everyone get behind the wall? Because that's who she was. That's the whole of her in 5 words. Everything else, the stillness, the skill, the terrible competence, all of it was just in service of that one question. Are the slow ones safe? Are the ones who can't run all right? The galaxy spent years trying to figure out the mystery of the soft-spoken girl who was so good at war. There was never any mystery. She just loved people. That's all. She just loved people more than the war had managed to take out of her, and she would put her own small body between them and anything in the universe, and she would not let go, and she would not let go, and she would not let go. Get behind the wall. I have heard a great many last orders, from a great many soldiers, on a great many dying fields. I have never heard a better one.